Chapter 121. Just when the skeleton swung his axe at Lu Shu once more, Lu Shu acted first and grabbed the neck of the skeleton. He exerted his strength and pushed the skeleton forward, causing it to lose its balance. Lu Shu then gave it a powerful kick to its hip, his huge strength smashing the entire hip of the skeleton to bits. He took the axe from the skeleton and left the skeleton sprawled on the floor. Despite having only its upper body left, the skeleton was still trying its best to get up and to have a go at Lu Shu. Lu Shu did all this to understand how to kill the skeleton for good. Seemingly, as long as the two bright green flames in the eyes of the skeleton didn't extinguish, it would not be possible for the skeleton to die. He stomped on the skeleton's skull into smithereens and looked around his surroundings on this small hill with an axe in hand. Everywhere was made up of yellow soil and there was not a single person in sight. There were up to 10,000 people including soldiers and students when they were first swept into this realm. Why was there not a single person around? Just how big is this ancient remain? Or could it be that everyone was swept into a realm independently? It can't be. Otherwise, why would people fight over the relic in the remain? If this was the case, everyone could look for their own items in their own realm. As Lu Shu was pondering seriously, he heard a strange sound suddenly. He turned around to see the surrounding yellow soil loosening as if something was digging its way up. Lu Shu counted. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, damn, there's more than 20. Hopefully, they're not all skeletons? Jackpot. As Lu Shu stared at the loosening soil, a white, bony hand stuck itself out of the soil. There was no time to think and Lu Shu had to run immediately. This wasn't any game which rewarded experience points for killing monsters. There was no benefit from fighting these monsters at all, and killing them would only stain the axe. Lu Xiaoyu might even complain about it if he was to bring it home. There was really no point in fighting the monsters. It wasn't an issue of looking for resources in the ancient remain anymore. It was an issue of escaping this place quickly to avoid the countless resurgent skeletons. Humans can get tired but the skeletons wouldn't. At least it was like that in the movies. He had to treat this seriously. He then thought. What if everyone had to face these skeletons? He could handle them all right, but what about those students currently in Class F? What about those soldiers? Given the strength of these skeletons, even if it was a Daoyuan student who had completed the mysterious matter chapter, it might just be a deadlock. Lu Shu didn't even want to think about the soldiers' terrible predicament. Thinking of their willingness to place the students ahead of themselves such as during mealtimes made his heart ache. But Lu Shu didn't know where to run. There was a sun in the sky and there was nothing else on the ground. He calculated for a moment before deciding to run in the direction of the sun. Small bits of land started shifting when he passed by but Lu Shu didn't even have the time to react. Luckily for him, he could run fast, or else it would be like that game he saw in the past in which the main character had to battle numerous monsters. Lu Shu ran like the wind and as he went further, the movements from the ground stopped. Not long after he started running, he heard some noises. This was noise from a person. This made Lu Shu feel rather delighted, at least he wasn't here alone. He bolted across a small hill and saw a group of people running towards him with a huge horde of skeletons hot on their heels. What gave Lu Shu a grave outlook was not the chase, but there were two motionless bodies of students not far away in the middle of a pool of blood. People actually died. It wasn't a nice feeling being in the face of death. Lu Shu knew clearly that the ancient remains coexisted alongside the real world. Once you are dead, you are dead. There was no revive button. These two students were still alive 10 minutes ago but are now lying motionless here. They have died in their youth, their golden years when they should be enjoying life the most. Lu Shu thought about this early on. On the path of cultivation and training, there was a big possibility of battling and dying. His adaptability was very strong and he tried to accept death very lightly, but in reality, it was something which was very hard to do. He was frantic but didn't show any signs of panic. The approaching students ran past Lu Shu and some of them advised him to run quickly. But Lu Shu remained rooted to the ground. Someone tried to pull Lu Shu away, but another guy lugged him on. Why care about him? Don't you want to live? At this time, only the fastest could survive. You didn't have to be faster than the skeletons, just be faster than the other survivors. At that instant, Lu Shu dashed towards more than 10 skeletons with his axe in hand. For some reason, these skeletons didn't have any weapons on them, which was all the better. Lu Shu thundered his first swing onto the frame of the first skeleton, sending it flying back and into another skeleton. Lu Shu had great strength now, much greater than any of his classmates. The students who were running for their lives turned around to look at Lu Shu when they heard noises. Surprisingly, they saw Lu Shu battling the gang of skeletons with an axe in his hand. Lu Shu learned swordplay, but the move he learned the most was swinging. The details of the swing were immaculate, for example how to swing, how to exert strength. These were intricacies that Lu Shu was very familiar with. Every swing of the axe was used efficiently, and never were the skeletons shown any mercy. These were the fruits of Lu Shu's tough training. Those students could only stare with wide eyes. The skeletons which frightened them so much didn't stand a chance against Lu Shu and his axe. Every swing of his axe looked extremely fierce and aesthetic. Was he a Daoyuan student like them? Why was he so much more aggressive? They were obviously of different class. These students behaved with pride in school, often feeling high and mighty under the name of Daoyuan class. But at this moment, they looked at Lu Shu and then back at themselves, subconsciously feeling a tinge of guilt and shame. Which city did this Daoyuan student belong to? Could he be a prodigy of Tier B or Tier A aptitude? Should we go and help him? Someone suggested even though he was a little afraid, which was why he wanted everyone to go together. Let's see how things go. It seems like he can handle it on his own, they just couldn't suppress their fear in their hearts. This group of people were randomly grouped together and didn't know each other. They didn't have much trust or chemistry as they, after all, didn't know each other. As Lu Shu killed off the last skeleton, he was glad to have made it out unscathed, even though he almost hurt himself a few times before. Indeed, once the numbers of the skeletons increase, it was harder to handle. Chapter 122. What plans do you guys have? Lu Shu turned around and asked. Since there are no skeletons left here, let's stay here. Maybe the ancient remain might dissipate soon. Lu Shu frowned. He wasn't willing to stay at a single location, and the facts have been proven that this place was unsafe. Then what if I want to leave? What do you guys have in mind? Don't leave, please stay and protect us. Lu Shu shook his head. The skeletons dig their way out from the earth. When moving around, notice if there are skeletons trying to dig their way out. Run if you notice it, and after a certain distance, the skeleton will stop moving. If you meet them up front, smash their skulls as they'll only die that way. This axe was taken from a skeleton and it's extremely sharp. You can give it to the strongest person here, Lu Shu said as he turned around and tossed the axe to them. These students didn't help Lu Shu when they were in a position of advantage, and Lu Shu was not confident of bringing this group of students around in this strange ancient remain. If they had been braver previously, Lu Shu might have brought them along, as at least he wouldn't be alone. At least. If he was injured, these students could help him. But alas, these students didn't have much courage. Was there a point in being a hero in such a place? Just moments ago, if he was to be injured by the skeletons, he would have probably met with a tragic end. If those students saw him injured, their first reaction would most probably be to run. Lu Shu was no hero, he never was. It was already very benevolent of him to give them the axe, he still wanted to make it home to see Lu Xiaoyu. This axe gave him some queries. Although it looked stained and rusty, it was extremely practical and useful, and it revealed its other side through battle. Sturdy and sharp. He killed more than 10 skeletons consecutively. A normal axe would definitely leave some scratches or be damaged, but this axe was different. It felt sharp all the way until the end. So by giving them this axe, this group of people would probably survive if they were not too silly. Having this axe, they would be able to stand a chance against the skeletons. But if this group of people only knew how to run, what point was there in Lu Shu bringing them along? Someone in the group wanted to ask Lu Shu to stay. Meeting such a skilled person in such an environment, they wanted to seek protection, but Lu Shu had not the slightest intention of staying behind. They would never have thought that Lu Shu was still treated by many in Luo Cheng's Daoyuan class as a metahuman with tier F aptitude, and treated as a loser by many back at home. If we had helped him just now, would he continue to help us? Someone asked abruptly. But there was ultimately no answer to this question. They would only know the answer if they had gone to help him. Another question came in immediately after: who will wield this axe? Lu Shu moved forward extremely cautiously as he was worried that there might be other changes in this ancient remain. The yellow soil here gave rise to different landforms such as gullies and ravines, and sometimes it was hard to make out what these landforms held without going near. He realized a problem as he looked at the sky. If the sun rose and set as usual, it meant that nightfall existed in this place. Nightfall. This word came with an ominous connotation. Lu Shu felt that it was critical for him to search for shelter or somewhere to avoid risks and dangers before nightfall. The best was an open area where he could easily observe the surroundings and run when needed to. The worst place, he thought, would be a cave. What if something blocked the exit of the cave? If that was the case, he would likely be dead. So to find a place where he could observe his surroundings and move about without problems was his top priority. Lu Shu glanced around and locked his eyes onto a small ridge. That ridge had a higher ground, so it was easier to observe any movements in his surroundings. He wanted to get there quickly but realized it was quite a distance away and it would take some time for him to reach his destination. He met several skeletons along the way and managed to snatch a metal sword with rusted stains. With his prior knowledge, he had no doubts about the efficiency of the weapon. Moreover, his primary weapon was a sword, and he felt much more comfortable brandishing the sword in his hands. Through this process, he saw human corpses occasionally. Some belonged to students while others belonged to soldiers, and they had all just died not too long ago. These corpses made Lu Shu extremely somber. At this point in time, the sun was setting and the reddish light cast a huge red shade onto everything in this world. Lu Shu was running alone in the broad wilderness, and the cruel light made everything seem like it was covered in blood. At this moment, in a ravine about 10 meters away from Lu Shu came a paw sound. A red light suddenly rose into the sky. Lu Shu's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the fabled magical instrument? He squatted down gently and jumped up almost immediately. He jumped extremely high, stirring up dust and particles in the surrounding soil. That red light was extremely bright, and not knowing what it was, Lu Shu did not dare to grab it using his hands. At that moment when he jumped up, he swiped the red light with his sword and with a dang, that red light was knocked back precisely by Lu Shu. Lu Shu stood rooted to the ground at the ravine, seemingly stunned. The red light gave off a constant hum from not far away. A male student was standing opposite him, with a signal gun in his hand. Lu Shu was rather confused and couldn't understand the situation. The other party stood there utterly confused as well. Then, Lu Shu realized that what he beat down was just a signal flare. It was such a teaser. The other party was evidently more confused than him. From Haruto to Kumi's distress, plus 555. This student never expected the signal flare, which he sent out, to be beaten down by someone just like that. Beaten down. Yes, it was actually beaten down. Who was this guy who could beat down a flare? It was really confusing. There's no logic. The two of them stared at each other. Lu Shu's large eyes staring intently at the small eyes of the other party. The two were at a state of having absolutely no idea what was going on, no idea who the other party was, and thus waiting for the other party to make a move to see what would happen. Lu Shu was rather curious upon receiving the distress point update. This douche has a Japanese name? Could he be a spy? He once saw a documentary which highlighted some events a spy went through. Spies would live in a foreign country from a young age, and as time passed, the spies would forget their own country, behaving exactly like a local in the foreign land. Eating porridge, noodles, rice, vegetables, and mastering the local language and accent, just like the spies were from the place itself. But this did not change the fact that they were spies. Lu Shu suddenly felt that this distress point update could at times be of great use. He knew the real name of the other party. Chapter 123. Based on Lu Shu's analysis, those that entered were Daoyuan students, members of the Heavenly Network, and soldiers. The Heavenly Network had a standardized black coat, soldiers had their army uniforms, and Daoyuan students wore all kinds of clothes. Shifei mentioned before that Daoyuan students would have to wear uniforms in the near future, which Lu Shu could understand. Things like standardized uniforms would be a step towards establishing an identity. If every aspect was standardized, it would improve their mentality as a team. Of course, there were others from other countries in this remains since the area was too large for every corner to be kept under surveillance. But Lu Shu believed that if these people were planning an attack, they wouldn't be dressed as casual as the students and not carry any weapons with them. This student had nothing with him besides a flare gun, and the material of this flare gun looked rather weird. Lu Shu suddenly recalled some news. A murderer outside the border printed a one-time use handgun which could bypass security. One thing was for certain, this guy was definitely not Chinese as proven by the income record. As a spy, making use of high-tech means was understandable. Lu Shu did not speak to the other party, and neither did that person. That person was still fuming about his signal flare being struck down. Before entering the remains, they were told to use their flares to signify a gathering point in case they split up. The rendezvous point would be 1 kilometer east of the flare, and the more people could be gathered, the stronger their manpower. The plan was good, but in the end, the signal flare was shot down. What's your damn problem? Even if he wanted to fire another signal flare, it was impossible. The 3D printed flare gun may be able to bypass the security check at the foot of the mountain, but its greatest flaw was that it was only one-time use. The others still had their flare guns, but there were no flare signals seen. This could only mean that something had happened to them or that the remain was too large for the flare to be seen. What a headache. He had yet to find out that Lu Shu knew his real name but only couldn't read it since he didn't know Japanese. Lu Shu remained silent. This scum had been contributing waves of distress points. Every few minutes, he would contribute 100 plus, 200 plus, and Lu Shu was excited. This guy is such a distress points generating machine. With this continuous income of distress points, Lu Shu gleefully kept his silence, and he could do this all day. The other party was frustrated. Are you a sculptor? So resilient in keeping silent? Although he grew up in China, he regularly received training from his organization, and when it came to perseverance and tolerance, his was way higher than the others his age, but now. Ahem, are you a Daoyuan student too? From which city? My name is Chang Hengyue, you? This self-identified as Chang Hengyue spy asked as he couldn't tolerate the silence anymore. Lu Shu heard the other party's fluent Chinese and replied, oh, I'm from Nanyang City's Daoyuan class, name's Lu Li. You? I'm from Nanyang City, Chang Hengyue said with a grimace. From Haruto Takumi's distress, plus 666. Oh. I remembered wrong, I'm from Shuma City. That flare signal you fired just now, did your school distribute them? Excuse me, but I thought that it was some treasure that appeared in this remain. Lu Shu laughed awkwardly. This was all an act. Who would believe that the Heavenly Network distributed flare guns to normal Daoyuan students? Chang Hengyue could no longer believe what this guy was saying, but he played along. Hi, student Lu Li. That's right, the flare gun was given by my school, yours didn't? He glances at the sword in Lu Shu's hand. Did you find that in the remains? Can I take a look? Lu Shu heard those words and thought, how could I give this to him? What if he used it to attack me? After all those distress points, how can I be sure that this scum has no intentions of cutting me? But he still wanted to continue chatting with the spy but couldn't, as the atmosphere would be too awkward. After thinking for a long time, Lu Shu tactfully replied, I can't. A typical cautious Lu Shu. Chang Hengyue was extremely annoyed. He had thought that between students, borrowing something to take a look was absolutely fine, but who knew this guy wasn't normal? So be it. He had a rough gauge on Lu Shu's skills, someone who could strike down the signal flare. Although the signal flare was much slower than a normal bullet, not everyone could achieve such a feat. Both of them were unsure of each other's strength, and the spy wasn't sure if he could beat this weirdo called Lu Li. But this could not continue. The mission in this remains wasn't to mess around with this mad student, and he had to regroup with the rest quickly. Student Lu Li, I'm happy to meet you, but I have to go look for the rest of my classmates now. They might be in danger, and it's my responsibility as the class rep to help them. You should go and hide quickly. Since you're not a class rep, you don't have to take the risk. Chang Hengyue said agitatedly and extremely animatedly. How coincidental, but I'm the class rep too. I'll go with you, Lu Shu said cheekily, knowing that you're a spy, how could I let you go? And Lu Li's identity was a class rep as well. Chang Hengyue felt extremely uneasy. From Haruto to Kumi's distress, plus 999. That's great, this guy's distress point contribution was catching up with Lu Li's, what a contributor. No matter how badly this Chang Hengyue wanted to leave, Lu Shu had to find an excuse to follow. This might earn him 10 celestial fruits. Lu Shu calculated that including yesterday's distress points for Lu Li, he had amassed 34,000 plus distress points. The distance between him and lighting up the 5th star, which required 80 celestial fruits, no longer seemed as far away. Chang Hengyue became ruthless. He wasn't certain about this Lu Li's skills, but since he wanted to follow him so doggedly, he did not have to hold back anymore. At that point in time, Chang Hengyue wasn't sure if Lu Shu knew about him. Logically, a normal Daoyuan student shouldn't be able to infer his identity as a spy from just a signal flare. But the problem lied in the fact that this guy mentioned his home city wrongly, which was extremely suspicious. And Chang Hengyue wasn't stupid, so he was going to make the first move in the night. Chapter 124. At the remains, night had fallen as the blood-red rays of light faded into the horizon. At least the moonlight in the remains was brighter than outside, probably due to the lack of clouds and fog. Lu Shu and Chang Hengyue were running towards a certain direction on the yellow soil, which was mottled with ravines. Under the night sky, the rows and rows of ravines looked like abysses. Chang Hengyue wanted to test Lu Shu's strength and increased his speed on purpose. Initially, Lu Shu could still keep up, but he soon started to pant and requested for Chang Hengyue to slow down. Chang Hengyue realized that this Lu Li student wasn't as strong as him. But he was still wary of the sword in the Lu Shu's hand. Since he had entered this remain, he must have known that the weapons inside weren't as simple as they looked. Many average practitioners had been inside but weren't good enough to obtain the relic. In the end, they would target the best weapon they could get their hands on. These weapons could resonate with your vitality, and Chang Hengyue had seen a South American expert cut a family vehicle into half in a video. Such feat wasn't possible with normal weapons. Basically, remains were the resources fueling the magical era. Treasures, medicine, weapons were more bountiful here than outside, which explained why all the experts were eyeing the remains. Lu Shu observed his surroundings and noticed many dead corpses along the way, dampening his mood. He suddenly felt tired following the spy as he had to rush along with him and at the same time acting as though he was panting. Distress points were really hard to earn. At this moment, the mounds on the ground suddenly moved regardless of whether they were close to them. Lu Shu observed closely, and not all of the mounds were moving, but that the skeleton's detection range had increased. Based on this, could it be that they grew more powerful in the night? The ground was turning red and Lu Shu looked up at the sky. The originally white moonlight had become a bright red color, and the night was especially cold. Lu Shu was shocked. There was a huge change taking place in the remains during the night. In no time, the underground skeletons would have surfaced and this place would become a living hell. Everywhere would be filled with walking skeletons. The situation was quite dire, and if he was too slow, he might never make it out. At this moment, Chang Hengyue increased his speed. He had originally planned to kill this Lu Li, and this nighttime situation was perfect. As long as he was faster than Lu Shu, he could make it to a safe location and Lu Shu would eventually die at the hands of these skeletons. Chang Hengyue knew that inside the remains, there were safe locations as well. This was knowledge based on his half-a-year experience with remains, and whenever someone was injured, finding a safe location would be the priority. Based on his previous observations, Chang Hengyue reckoned that Lu Li wouldn't be able to escape. Hold on, Chang Hengyue suddenly turned to Lu Shu and shouted, "Throw me your sword, I'll fight a way out for you." Lu Shu immediately offered up the sword, but he didn't throw it. The distance between the two of them was over 10 meters, and by extending out his sword, Chang Hengyue wouldn't be able to reach it. With no other choice, Chang Hengyue had to turn around to retrieve the sword. This sword was valuable to him as being able to obtain a weapon was already worth the trip. In the day, Chang Hengyue had just been waiting and only killed 1 or 2 skeletons. Unlike Lu Shu who encountered 2 armed skeletons, Chang Hengyue didn't know that skeletons could carry weapons and had all along thought that Lu Shu found that weapon. As he turned around to return to Lu Shu's side, the skeletons already had their torsos above ground. Lu Shu suddenly screamed fanatically, so scary. Ah! It was as though he had just witnessed a traumatic scene which caused him to unleash his true potential. Chang Hengyue had already arrived beside Lu Shu, ready to retrieve the sword when Lu Shu suddenly sped ahead, leaving him behind. F***ck. Chang Hengyue almost stumbled into the ground. From another 900 plus distress points. Seeing Lu Shu running faster and faster, Chang Hengyue suspected if this scum was previously hiding his true strength, or if he was really shocked into unleashing his true potential. For normal people, a shock could cause a sudden increase in strength, and not to mention practitioners. Such cases were definitely possible, but Chang Hengyue felt something not right. This Lu Li running ahead would only trigger more skeletons, and would I be in trouble? When the skeletons surfaced, they would be cutting me instead of the people in front. This incurred Chang Hengyue's murderous intent. He had previously found this scum troublesome, but being played like this, he really wanted to kill him. Lu Shu continued running ahead and screaming fanatically while he received distress points. Looking at the continuous plus 19 plus 41 plus 21 plus 38 income, this was way better than a one-time income. Awesome. In fact, Lu Shu knew that Chang Hengyue wasn't stupid and that he would eventually find a way to get rid of him. Chang Hengyue would start to have suspicions about Lu Shu's motives. Lu Shu was no dimwit either and he didn't underestimate the other party. This time, he planned for Chang Hengyue to die right there. As long as he was running ahead, there would be a trail of skeletons to deal with Chang Hengyue. But Lu Shu underestimated Chang Hengyue a little. His speed also increased, and although he wasn't as fast as Lu Shu, he definitely wasn't a normal Daoyuan student. Based on his strength, he must be a high-tier aptitude. He should have already completed the Mysterious Senses chapter. As Lu Shu just decided to increase his speed, he suddenly realized that there were no more new mounds. The two of them had escaped the skeletons and entered a safe zone. Lu Shu gave up on his plan to increase speed and while panting, he waited for Chang Hengyue ahead in the safe zone. When Chang Hengyue arrived, the two of them stood there quietly taking deep breaths. The situation was extremely awkward as neither of them spoke. They were both extremely conscious of each other and couldn't figure out if the other party was really out of breath. Chang Hengyue was trying to figure out Lu Shu's real strength while Lu Shu was guessing if this person was really a spy or of some other identity. Chapter 125. Before he entered the ancient remain, Lu Shu never thought that he would be battling another person. In his opinion, the opening of the ancient remains signified an exploration and adventure, with many treasures and perils awaiting them. But never did he expect so much deceit and killing in this place. To be honest, it was because the heavenly network concealed all these too well. If he had encountered those practitioners who intended to trespass empty Beimeng at the foot of the mountain, he would have been prepared and entered the mental state of battle earlier on. But in reality, he didn't. All the Daoyuan students were training peacefully in the military base, making use of the rich magical energy to cultivate their skills. In fact, the heavenly network never had the intentions of allowing these students into the actual ancient remain. But everything in the world would never go as planned. Neither one of Lu Shu and Chang Hengyue made the first move. Lu Shu feared Chang Hengyue's mysteriousness as a spy while Chang Hengyue feared the sword snuggled in Lu Shu's hand. Once a practitioner reaches Class D, it was difficult for a normal sword to do much damage. The physique and structure of the body of a Class D practitioner were much sturdier and durable than any normal weapon. Chang Hengyue had a dagger hidden in his sleeve. If he suddenly struck Lu Shu at his neck or a vital part with his dagger, he might likely be able to win. But it was human nature to protect themselves, especially their vital parts. It was instinctive. It was akin to blinking when someone punches your face. It would be a subconscious and instinctive move. That's why Chang Hengyue didn't make use of this opportunity to kill this Lu Li in one blow. The two people were stuck in a stalemate again. In reality, not many people were willing to fight to the death in battle. Everyone felt it was better to bide their time to wait for a better opportunity. Never expected the two of us to be able to run over. You run quite fast. Chang Hengyue took the initiative to break the silence. Never expected myself to run so fast at a critical moment, Lu Shu replied with a laugh. The two doubtful people suddenly found peace with each other all of a sudden. Let's go to a safer place to rest. Good idea. The two of them continued advancing towards a small hill. Although they were moving together, there was a distance of at least 5 meters kept between them. People always say that there was a subconscious safety distance kept between people. If you were warmer towards a person, that person would walk closer to you. The distance between these two people was indeed quite safe. Lu Shu suddenly thought. Could anyone in Luoqing's Daoyuan class be a spy like Chang Hengyue? Most of his distress points amassed were contributed by his classmates, so he couldn't really identify the true identity of people in other classes. Once they reached the hill, Lu Shu stared at the ravines below him calmly. Who would have thought that there were so much malice and cruelty in this calm land? The two of them claimed to come up to rest, but neither of them decided to rest and didn't dare to train as well. The situation was extremely awkward, and it stayed that way until day broke. The blood-red moon only faded into its normal color at the break of dawn. Grr. Chang Hengyue's stomach rumbled. He must be hungry. From yesterday afternoon till now, no one had eaten anything since they entered this realm. Daoyuan students never intended to come here, so they were not prepared and did not have any food on them. It had almost been a day in this place. They didn't feel it when they were running, but now that they were idle, they could feel their immense hunger. There wasn't anything edible in this place, and dying of hunger here was very possible. But Lu Shu didn't see such a problem. As long as he ditched Chang Hengyue, he could get a few pieces of tofu from the lottery. If he was lucky, he might even get a crepe. Damn, his mischief system could actually be so useful. The two of them stayed there for the entire morning and Lu Shu was thoroughly frustrated. He then said he needed to relieve himself and went to a gully nearby, obtaining a piece of tofu and wolfing it down immediately before returning. Lu Shu, being as cautious as ever, went back by another route in fear of an ambush by Chang Hengyue. As he got back, he chanced upon Chang Hengyue grabbing tightly onto something hidden in his sleeve. Lu Shu was curious, and asked with his mouth still full, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" This was what Lu Shu wanted to ask, but nothing could be made out clearly as his mouth was stuffed with tofu. He didn't worry about Chang Hengyue asking why he brought along food. As long as he didn't allow Chang Hengyue to see the process of him obtaining the food, he couldn't draw the link between the piece of tofu and his system. Most people would probably think that he brought food along with him, while others might think that his special ability was to conjure food. But all this was not important. As Chang Hengyue looked at Lu Shu eating, he was stunned. This person actually brought food along. He actually had food. Chang Hengyue, who had been hungry the entire day, couldn't believe his eyes. From +999. He thought both of them wasting each other's time would lead to both of them being casualties, but the other party was not disadvantaged in any way. "Are you eating stinky tofu?" Chang Hengyue questioned. He had smelled the stench of stinky tofu. He was rather confused, so he asked the question.
"Yeah."
Stinky tofu, this stench could not be concealed and there was no reason to lie anyway. Chang Hengyue was utterly dumbfounded. "I could understand if you had biscuits or other dry rations on your body, who would have stinky tofu on themselves? How did he store it? Are you mad?" Lu Shu continued to swallow the food in his mouth. As the food entered his stomach, Lu Shu felt more energetic than ever before. He had never been this hungry in a long while. When was the last time he was so hungry? Probably when he just left Fuli orphanage, when he was hungry for 2 whole days. He wasn't willing to beg for food, he wasn't willing to steal, and didn't accept gifts from anyone. He thought he would die from hunger just like that at that point in time. After that, a barbecue street stall owner took pity him and hired him as a waiter, providing him with dinner and a small wage. At that point in time, Lu Shu only had that single meal each day. After Lu Shu finished, he continued delaying time with Chang Hengyue. "Shall I tell you a story?" Chang Hengyue became alert and wary. Could this trash be using the story as a guise to break this stalemate? Only to hear Lu Shu giggling: "Steamed lamb cake, roasted duck, roasted chicken, roasted goose, braised pork, sesame chicken, roasted delights. Why did you memorize all this?" From Haruto Takumi's Distress, +1000.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens.